ever think about how different life might be if you'd, gone down a totally different education path? Well, that's kind of what we're digging into today. Kenya's higher education system is going through some changes, some pretty big proposed changes that could really shake things up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation. We're looking at two amendment bills, actually, headed to Parliament next month. And they could really change how universities, how they operate, how they function.
Exactly, yeah. We're not talking about like little tweaks here. These bills go right to the core, like who's in charge and what kind of educational programs are even offered. So imagine a world where the president picks who runs each university, and universities can't offer those diploma courses anymore. Kind of wild, right?
Huge changes. Yeah, definitely big changes. And it's causing a lot of debate, as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's break it down, starting with what I'm calling the diploma dilemma. We've got Embakasi MP Gathiru. He's got this bill Not 5 of 2023. It basically says universities stick to degrees, leave the diplomas to technical colleges.
Interesting. His reasoning is that he argues that having universities and TVET institutions, those are Kenya's technical and vocational education and training centers, by having both of them offer diplomas, it just creates confusion.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a restaurant trying to be both a fancy steakhouse, a burger joint.
Yeah, exactly. It muddies the waters. Gathiru thinks that by having clearer distinctions, it'll help improve the quality and make the whole system more efficient.
Okay, I get that, yeah. But wouldn't that create a problem? Like, wouldn't that create a gap for students who, want a more academic approach, but to a vocational field? Couldn't universities offer, specialized diploma programs that maybe even team up with TVETs for the hands-on stuff?
You bring up a great point, and it gets at, one of the core tensions here, right? This balancing act between specialization and flexibility. And one of our sources, Dr. Wilfrida Aitalondo, she's an education expert from Kenyatta University. She makes a really interesting argument about what TVETs are good at.
Oh, always good to hear from those on the ground, in the system. What's her take?
She argues that TVETs are actually better suited, better equipped for this diploma-level training because they have, the workshops, the labs, those more practical hands-on facilities, and they're more closely linked, their curriculum, to the Kenya National Exam Council. That's who sets the standards for technical education.
Okay, that makes sense. But, it always comes back to money talks, right? A lot of these public universities depend on those diploma courses for a big chunk of their revenue. So what happens when that's gone?
Right, yeah, that's a huge concern. There's no way around it. It's a potential financial hit.
Yeah.
But Dr. Aitalando's point is maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe it forces universities to focus on what they should be best at, offering those high-quality degree programs.
So it's like a push to say, hey, universities, step up your game. Be so good that you don't need those diploma fees to survive.
Exactly, yeah. Strategic thinking about their role in the bigger picture of education.
All right, so we've got this diploma dilemma simmering, but now let's throw in this other ingredient that makes this whole situation really fascinating, this idea of the president appointing university leaders.
Yeah, that's Kilifi North MP Owen Baya, his bill. It's bill number 16 of 2024. And the aim is to give that power, the power to appoint university vice-chancellors, to the president.
Okay, hold on. Before we even get into the good or bad, can we just acknowledge that's a lot of power? Like, that's a ton of influence over higher ed in one person's hands.
Absolutely, no question.
Yeah.
Baya's argument is that the way it works now with the Public Service Commission involved, it's too slow, too much bureaucracy. It takes forever to get those vice-chancellors appointed, and it creates these leadership gaps at some universities.
Yeah.
His bill, the idea is to speed things up, make it more efficient.
I mean, streamlining, that sounds great, but doesn't that potentially open the door to, favored candidates getting those top jobs? Even if it's not straight up cronyism, just the appearance of political influence, that's hard to get past.
Yeah, you're hitting on a major concern for sure. A lot of people share that worry.
Right.
Now, Dr. Aitalondo, she's not totally against presidential appointments, but she is very clear that it has to be transparent. The process, the selection, it's got to be based on merit, no matter who's making the final call.
So less about the WHO and more about the HOW, right? Checks and balances, making sure it's all above board.
Absolutely, yeah. It's where things get tricky, right? We're trying to balance making decisions faster with the risks of giving one person that much power.
Classic trade-off. I bet this is going to get interesting as these bills go through Parliament. What should we be looking for as this unfolds? Like, what are the key things to keep an eye on?
The details are key. How will these changes actually work in practice? Who's responsible for making sure everything's running smoothly? What are the safeguards to prevent, things going off the rails?
So it's not just the big headlines, it's the nuts and bolts of the legislation,
Yeah.
right? What else? What else should we be watching?
Well, we need to hear from the people who will actually be affected by this. Students, faculty, administrators, the folks running the TVETs. What are their concerns? What are they hoping for? It's crucial to get that full picture, understand the potential impact from all sides.
Makes sense. And of course, we need to make sure the whole legislative process is transparent, open and honest debate, chances for the public to weigh in, accountability, that's all critical.
Couldn't agree more. The future of Kenyan higher education, it hinges on these conversations happening in a way that's transparent, that takes everyone's needs into account.
Now, before we get into what could happen if these changes go through, let's zoom out for a second. Let's look at the bigger challenges Kenyan higher education's facing, even without these new bills. Things aren't exactly smooth sailing as it is, right? What are some of the key issues?
Well, funding. Funding's always a big one. Public universities in Kenya, like a lot of places, they're often strapped for cash. Affects everything, faculty salaries, how good the facilities are. And these changes we're talking about, they could make that problem even worse for some universities.
Right, especially if those diploma fees dry up. It's like squeezing an already tight budget, yeah.
Yeah.
What else? What other challenges are we seeing? It's like a whole pile of problems, yeah.
Mm.
Beyond money, what else are people worried about in Kenyan higher education?
Access, getting in. Even if you qualify for university, can you afford it? That's
Yeah.
a big one. And then there's, not all parts of the country have the same opportunities.
So even if you crush those exams, your family's finances or even just where you live could still be a barrier.
Sadly, yeah. It all ties back to that bigger question of fairness. How do we make sure everyone gets a shot at a quality education, no matter their background?
It's not just a Kenya thing, that's for sure. Feels like we're adding these big, system-wide problems on top of the potential chaos these bills could create. So where does that leave us?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, trying to solve one problem and maybe creating others. But let's try to think it through, right? What could happen if these bills pass, good and bad? With Githiru's bill, the ones who like it, they say separating diplomas and degrees could make both better.
So each type of institution can focus on what they're good at, become the experts.
Exactly. Universities go all in on research, and those high-level degrees, TVETs, get even more practical, more focused on those specific job skills. Win-win, maybe.
Okay, I see how that could work, but what about the downsides? What if it backfires?
Well, it's that financial hit to universities. It could be huge. And like we said, that impacts everything else.
Right, back to that budget crunch. And couldn't it also limit choices for some students?
You got it. Some students might not be degree material yet, but a university-level diploma could be perfect for them. Take that away, and you might be shutting doors.
So Githiru's bill, it's a mixed bag, for sure. What about Baya's idea, giving the president the power to appoint? What's the word on the street about that one?
Some folks say it could mean stronger leadership for universities. Cut through all that red tape, get strong leaders in place faster. They can tackle problems head on.
I can see the appeal of that, wanting things to move faster, but doesn't that come with its own set of headaches?
Absolutely. And the biggest one, like we talked about, is that political influence. Even if the president means well, it's hard to imagine those appointments not being seen as political.
Yeah, that favoritism thing, it's almost impossible to avoid. What about academic freedom? Does this change how professors and researchers do their work? If they feel like they're being watched all the time?
It's a real worry. Universities, they need open discussion. They need people to be able to challenge the status quo. If academics feel pressure to toe the line, to support certain political views, that's bad for everyone. It stifles creativity and critical thinking.
So it's this trade-off again, right? Efficiency versus academic freedom. No easy answers here.
It's complicated, yeah. Good arguments on both sides. And that's why it's so important for Kenyans to get involved, weigh the pros and cons, hold their leaders accountable, make sure these decisions are serving everyone, the whole higher education system.
Couldn't agree more. This isn't just some theoretical debate. It's about real lives, real futures. Now you, our listener, you've been with us through this whole thing. What are you thinking? What stands out to you? What worries you?
Think about where you are. What's the education system like in your country? Are there similarities? We'd love to hear your thoughts. But before we wrap up, let's take a step back and think even bigger.
Imagine you could start from scratch. Build a higher education system from the ground up. What would you prioritize?
Would you focus on access? Making sure everyone who wants to go can go no matter what?
Or would you aim for those top-tier institutions, known for research and academic excellence, even if it means fewer people get in.
Maybe you'd focus on something totally different, connecting education to jobs, making it easier to learn throughout your life.
There's no right answer, of course. It's about asking those tough questions. What is higher education, FOR? How can it best serve individuals and society as a whole?
We hope today's conversation has given you some things to think about. The changes happening in Kenya, they matter. And talking about these issues, challenging those assumptions, that's crucial.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep those brains working.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how different countries tackle those big questions about education, What works in one place might not work somewhere else, and there are always those tough choices to make.
Definitely. It's not about finding that one perfect solution that fits everybody. It's more about having those conversations, thinking it through, and making choices that make sense for each society and what they want.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into Kenyan higher education, there's one thing I've been thinking about. We talked a lot about universities, TVETs, but what about the students? Like, what's their role in all this? How much can they actually shape what higher ed looks like in the future? That's a huge point. Any education system, it should be about the students, right? Giving them the knowledge and skills to succeed. And that means listening to them, figuring out what they want, and letting them have a say in their own education.
It makes me think back to that whole diplomas versus degrees thing. Maybe the answer isn't about making those two paths completely separate. Maybe it's about making it easier to move between them.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Imagine a system where students could start with the TVET diploma, then move into a university degree program, or even the other way around.
Yeah.
Whatever fits their interests, their career goals.
That would be a game changer, yeah. Letting students customize their education instead of forcing them into one box.
Exactly. And it could help universities and TVETs work together better, too. A more connected system. That's what we need.
So as we leave you today, we want you to think about this. These changes in Kenya, they're just one part of a much bigger story. A story about funding, access, fairness, making sure education is relevant. And most importantly, it's about the students, what they want and what they need.
Have those conversations. Challenge those assumptions. Ask those tough questions. The future of education depends on it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Kenyan higher education. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those minds working.